So, hello and welcome back for our special Spin at Go public-private coaching. I'm Aarnimetsa from www.pokerimania.com. And
Hello, I'm the one getting coached, xxIxx.
Our moderator. So, we are having some interesting hands to go through that we looked through some folds. And during the break, we discussed a bit about hands that right now, I think for most people, it's going to be, when they are looking for leaks, it's going to be most obvious to look for something that you have called too much. But it's also going to be one of a really big decision that do you play a hand or not. And I think that's one of the biggest questions usually asked from me, that should we only look through the hands that I have played in. But I think for most people that's going to hide like half of the leaks, because there's going to be leaks also about what are going to be the hands that you play. And like in this session, I think we have had 2/3 of the time we are thinking about what hands didn't we play but would be profitable to play, rather than find mistakes on the hands that have been played. But now we are going for that, so it's going to be post-flop time as well. So, we are with Jack Deuce off. We got limped on. What do we do?
We check here.
Yep, it's going to be the most obvious way. Our hand is really bad. Something like Jack 8 off, Jack 9 off. I would like to have a shove here.
Yep.
And we don't hit anything. What do we do here?
We check back.
I think actually this is something that I'm going to be disagreeing you a bit. I'm thinking that if our opponent doesn't bet, we are trying to take it down on a flop. We don't have any draws. Our equity isn't that good on this kind of a flop. We don't have that much showdown value. If we bluff here, we can do it pretty cheaply, and we are practically never going to get. We are practically never going to lose value here if we bet, because there are not going to be weaker hands that we can.
Okay.
So there are going to be a lot of better hands that I think that will fold if we just bet, especially when our opponent checks.
Yeah.
If you had King Deuce off and checked preflop, are you betting? I'm thinking that with King Deuce off, we are having a lot more showdown equity. So I think it's going to be a sizable difference. So with King Deuce off, it's going to be more of a check, but we can bet. And especially when it goes that we are getting a jack, we are getting an ace on the turn. Our opponent checks to us. What do we do now?
Well, he's most likely not improving or trapping, so this is like the last time to try to bluff him out of the pot.
I'm thinking that if our opponent checks to us 2 times, we should bet with the weakest parts of our range at this point. And I'm thinking the Jack Deuce off is going to be weak enough that it should be bet instead of. Yeah. Because if we are betting here, we are also denying our opponent equity, because our opponent practically at least has 6 outs on the river.
Yeah.
River to improve. And we are getting a queen that shouldn't change anything, and our opponent checks 3rd time. And now, if we haven't bet thus far, we shouldn't bet now, because it's going to be increasingly unlikely that our opponent has even a better high or any pair. So when we check, we are seeing 8-4 suited. But there was a lot of equity that our opponent had on the turn and even on the flop.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, in this situation, it's going to be pretty much a situation that we want to bet with a polarized range. So we want to bet the weakest part of our range as a bluff and the strongest part of our range as a value.
Yeah.
Value and the medium. And then it's going to be the question of how strong do we view our hand.
Yeah.
And Jack deuce off is going to be pretty much on all streets. It's going to be. And something like ace deuce off would be, from on the flop, it would have sizably more showdown equity. Like king deuce off, it's going to be closer than if it's better to bet as a bluff or check behind. But with something like ace deuce, it's going to be a lot better to check behind, I think.
Yeah, sometimes the guys on these games, they could have a 9x or a 7x easily on their hand, and they check for trap and then shove on it. So then it's just fold. But I think that that flop looked a lot for me. It looked a lot for something that if I put aggression into this flop, I will get shoved down, and then I just lose chips. So I chose the passive way to just check down.
I think it's going to be that you are going to remember most of those times that you are getting shoved on, and if you are just getting the chips, it's going to be something that is not remarkable. So let's just forget about it. So I'm thinking that in those situations, in general, when our opponent checks, we are going to get folds most of the time if we bet.
Yeah.
It's like almost 2/3 of the time, I'd think that if we are in a position on the flop and we bet, that we are going to take it down.
Yeah, okay.
And when we are going for a half a pot bet, it's going to be pretty profitable for us.
Yeah.
In here, ace-3 off. What's the best line here?
This is an ass shove. But we can, I don't know, I probably win raise here.
I'm thinking that a shove would probably be better with a hand that plays pretty terribly post-flop against an opponent that doesn't 3-bet at all and doesn't like to fold. So I'm thinking like ace-3 off is going to be a really profitable shove.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a hand that's going to be hard to play post-flop. Like with ace-3 off, if we are looking at this hand, so let's go to look a bit about how our equity looks like. So we are going with ace-3 off, ax3y, and what kind of range our opponent would call us with? Let's think about it a bit. Our opponent would probably shove like his top part of his range. So we are getting called with something like this kind of a range. 10 to 35 or 10 to 40%. I think it's. So when we are looking at how our equity looks on the flop or on different flops, we would like to have an equity that when we are hitting, we really know it. Then we would like to have a lot of equity. So if we are having 50% equity, best kind of a hand as a postal playability would be a hand that would have 50% of 100% and then 50% of 0%, because you would always exactly know where you are. And with ace-2 off, the problem is that, like, even if you are hitting like your worst 5% of flops, you are still having about 30% equity. So there are a lot of really awkward situations where you just need to call even though you think you are behind, and it's going to be a hand that it's going to be really easy to get into problems.
Is this Poker Pro Tools? It's some kind of a freeware browser.
Yeah, it's a free online tool, and they're like the graph hand versus range is going to be. I think this is the best that I have seen to look like what's your equity against different kinds of ranges.
Yeah.
Across all flops. So I think this is going to be pretty.
It's at least easy to look at and understand the graph.
Yeah, man, it's going to be like in here you are seeing that if you are hitting I think this top 15% is going to be when you are hitting either an ace or an 3 or a straight. But like pretty much all the others are going to be, you are going to be guessing with ace-3 off, so it's going to be a hand that you would like to shove here rather than.
Yeah.
And we can compare against the hand that plays really well, like if we are comparing it to queen, actually. Let's have it suited, so it's going to be a bit better, 52% of equity. But when we are comparing this like hand versus range, I'm thinking that we are seeing that we are knowing a lot better where we stand. Like, when we are getting a lot of equity, we know it. And when we are getting a little of equity, we know also those kind of situations. And this is going to be like how different it's going to be for a hand that plays well post-flop. We are having a lot of situations where the equity is really high and a lot of flops. And when we are comparing a hand that plays pretty bad post-flop, we are having a lot of flops that are going to be medium equity and very little of really solid hits.
Yeah.
And in here, it's also going to be interesting when our opponent shoves the first time. I would probably fold as well, but it would stand for a question of how much our opponent needs to 3-bet here for it to be profitable to call. What do you think?
So how much does he have to shove?
How much does he need to 3-bet for us to be profitable to call after he's 3-bet?
Oh, well, with that stack size, he can 3-bet quite wide against my min raise.
Yeah. And with the Holder Resources calculator, we can graph pretty easily on like how ace-3 off plays against different 3-betting ranges. And we are seeing that it's about 27-ish% if you are having a linear 3-bet range.
Yeah.
So that doesn't discount the top of his range.
Okay.
And I'm actually thinking that pretty many guys are going to, like if we are looking at what kind of 27% looks like, it's going to have every pretty hand pretty much.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that this is going to be actually pretty close. If it would be like our opponent would need to shove only something like 17%, then it would be an easy call.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that if our opponent, like, if we would see that he had shoved, we have had 7 hands, so if he had shoved just once before, I would probably go for it with ace-3.
Yeah.
But in here it's going to be okay, and we wouldn't be in this situation if we would have just shoved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's going to be the thing of thinking, how do I wanna see a flop here, or do I wanna take the pot down, and what is my pre-flop equity, and what does my flop equities look like? How is this hand playing across different kinds of flops?
Yeah.
So then it's going to be like when we are having the heads up pot and we are having something like queen 10 suited, we'll know that we would like to. We'll pretty much know that we like to play it, as a min raise, and when we are having something like h3 off, that we are having a lot of hands, a lot of flops that we are having medium equity on, we would like to shove it before.
Yeah, and H3 off is a easy Nash shove, so should have just taken that line.
Yeah, and like Marcus Y said that Villain can shove something like Jack 10 suited here and we must fold. I wouldn't fold this against most people, but if I'm having a player that has never 3-bet me before and we are having about 30 hands, I'm thinking that the first 3-bet is usually going to be a bit of a tighter range.
Yeah.
And like Calleon said, that weak ace-x, weak pockets, and quite a few suited connectors are usually reasonable to open shove with that stack. Yes.
Yep.
That's exactly my point in here, that if you are having something like weak ace-x, some small suited connectors, some small pocket pairs, they are usually better to be shoved. Shoved with this kind of a stack size.
Yeah.
We are having a limper, and there is a Jack 7 off. What do we do here?
Well, we can check it, and I don't see a point of raising here.
I agree with you, surprisingly.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
and shoving here is bad for almost 20 big blinds.
If we are raising here, I would like to see a sizing of about 60, and I would like us to have a better hand like Jack 9,
Yeah.
Jack 10. I think Jack 7 is going to be slightly too weak. And if we are just min raising here, we are never going to get our opponent to fold, so we are just bloating the pot for no good reason, and we are in position here, so if we are having a small pot here, we are having more space to grab the pot for ourselves with a maneuver.
Yeah.
Our opponent checks. What do we do here?
I hope I bet here.
Yeah, I think if we are having something like Jack 6, we could also check here, but I think the medium pair with a okay-ish kicker is going to be good enough in a heads-up pot. And then the straight draw completes, flush draw completes. What do we do after we after we remove our hand from the facepalm position?
Well, we can all just check down to.
Yeah, I think in this situation, checking down is going to be really good. Because there are going to be multiple one-card straights, and I don't think that we can bluff.
And his limping range has tons of 9s and 8s and
10s and 5s, so it's... If we are thinking about a range that, or a 4-card board that would hit really well against the general limpers range, this would be a perfect example of it.
Yeah.
So we checked behind, that's good. We are almost having a straight flush on board. Opponent checks. What do we do here?
We check back.
Yeah. If this would be another 10, like 10 of spades, what it would be then?
We could raise.
Yeah, but with 4 to a flush, even though we are having the better end of a straight, I don't see point in raising. I think this was generally pretty well played. The pre-flop raise was the biggest WTF moment for me.
Yeah.
Like, why do you min raise here?
Yeah. I don't know.
Marcus, why? It might be my experience with sit and goes, but I pretty often tend to go for a pot control line in situations where an opponent has called me once and I'm having something like a pretty medium strength hand in there, because then I'm thinking that on the river we are going to have our opponent bluff us a bit more often, and then I think our hand plays more logically that way, because if we are betting the turn, like the turn would be a deuce of diamonds, and if we are betting the turn here something like, let's say 60 to 80 chips, it gives our opponent pretty perfect chance to shove. He has like a pot left to shove then. So, and then it will be a really nasty situation for us, and even if he calls then and shoves the river, it's going to be a nasty situation. I think in general it's going to be that when he calls, it tightens up his range in a way that we are not having that great. Like, when we don't know anything about our opponent's range except he checks pre-flop or checks on the flop, then our hand is playing that well against his range that with c-bet we are going to get value with worse, but on the turn it might be because I have been used to the ICM situations where pot controlling is usually going to be better.
And in this hand, now as we know the villain's hand, he would have shoved.
He would have shoved for sure.
On the turn.
Yeah.
Because he completes the straight.
It's either a shove or then he's calling and shoving the river. Yeah. Shoving the river, that's not going to be. And Calleon says that versus blank and a fizzy player, I would tend to bet turn with an idea to check river unimproved. I think it's going to be pretty close between checking the turn and betting the turn.
Say if that would have been like a deuce of hearts, I would have probably pushed in a second barrel.
I'm thinking that it's probably going to be better to check the turn, but I think Calleon disagrees with me here. And my reasoning would be that when our opponent has called the flop, he has told us that he's having a decent hand, or he's having a decent draw here.
Yeah, with and that stack size calling the flop, he has something, obviously.
Yeah, and I think if we are looking at the river, I'm thinking that if we are checking the turn, it's going to be quite likely that our opponent can then bet the river when he misses the draws, and bet the river also with weaker hands, I think. And I'm thinking that we are going to, on average, we are going to get more money against a weaker range that way. But it's going to be close. So I don't think it's going to be that huge difference if we are betting the turn, if the turn is blank, or if we are checking the turn. I'm thinking that the different options are pretty close together in evaluate.
Well, Calleon, that's the reasoning for my pot control style of play on that hand, because I was thinking that the villain has at least could have a two pair or slow playing, waiting for me to be aggressive.
I'm actually thinking that with that short stack sizes that we are having in here, I'm thinking actually that opponents without position are pretty often checking rather than donk betting, I think. Because I'm thinking that villains are going to, even with top pair, I'm thinking that, or I have faced a lot of that they are checking top pairs and stuff like that. Because if you are pretty much, I think the reasoning is that people that bet before flop are going to bet most flops anyway. So, but if this would have been a limped bot, I'm thinking that then the villain is betting top pair. Top pair a lot more often, because on limp bots it's not that likely that you are getting a bet from position. And oh yeah, the hero raised pre-flop, so that's probably the difference. xxIxx suited. What do we do here?
Women raise.
Women raise. I hope that this wasn't those hands that you shoved in a row. Nope. We min raise. That's good. What do we do on the flop?
Well, I think it's pretty just blank flop. So I probably just keep raising here.
And I think my point to be here, like I'm going to go for a polarized range here again. I'm thinking that most of the hands, like against a general opponent, I think that they are going to fold a bit too much. So, like this kind of a hand, we don't have a lot of equity. This is one of those perfect hands to bluff. And we don't have a lot of good turns that would improve our equity significantly.
Yeah.
There are like a few spades that are improving our equity significantly. And there are like 6 outs to a pair. And the 6 outs to a pair would be the most significant. So I'm going to bet here for value pretty much with any pair. And something like if we are having a weak deuce or we are having an ace high here, I'm thinking with ace highs, good queen highs as well, we could check, especially if we are having backdoor draws. But with most weak hands, I'm thinking a c-bet here would be really good. And Galleon said that c-bet and barrel spade and sometimes maybe 4 or 5. Yep. That's going to be a pretty solid plan. When you check your opponent's shoves.
Yeah.
And this is like the easiest fold ever. But I'm still thinking that you are getting better equity if you are betting something like 30 chips to a pot. You are taking it down some of the time.
And that shows the kind of games these are. If that guy has a king, how much value he loses there, or any pair.
Yeah. I think that there are spots that it actually makes sense to shove when there are both players are likely to have a really good hand and the pot is pretty small. Like when every draw completes, then it might make sense to shove because you would need your opponent to call so small amount of time with the larger bet, but those situations are pretty rare.
Yeah.
We are having the opponent that's having a tilting nickname, the Feed My Banker, because nobody likes to feed bankers. We are min raising here. Our opponent calls. Seems to be a trend. On the flop, what do we do?
Well, it's the almost same kind of flop. So we can see that here, small.
Yeah, and that's because our hand is pretty bad, and there is almost exactly the same kind of situation that we are not having that many cards that are going to improve. We are having a slightly better hand to improve because we are having some backdoor straight outs, but if we are going for backdoor draws, we might as well play Omaha, so. And Calleon, would this be a spot for limp stabs if we have these stats on Villain? I'm thinking that if I'm seeing this kind of a loose passive guy, I'm probably going for a min race rather than limp stab with these stack depths. But if we would have something like 300 chips here pre-flop, I think limp stabbing would probably be better. But I think this is one of those situations that you are losing some of the chips you might be stealing with the hands that are having next to no showdown value, next to no improving cards. So I'm thinking in this situation as well that we would aim for c-betting with a polarized range. And this is going to be one of those that is going to be pretty easy to raise fold.
Yeah.
This is actually one of those hands that I spoke to you a bit about. This was I think the first hand was pocket fives, then it was like ace deuce suited, and then it was ace 8 off, and you shoved 3 hands in a row. So
I was trying to feed his banker.
But it's
because the guy was playing like all these weird shoves, and it's the same guy, it's the same game. So I was just shoving because I thought let him call with 10 deuce off.
But if we are having a guy that seems to be really spoovy post flop,
yeah,
we would like to play hands with him rather than just shove. Like shoving is going to be probably plus EV, but it's going to be pretty thin, I think.
Okay.
And Calleon said 25 big blind shove, no hand that makes sense in my opinion. I think it might make sense with the small pocket pairs, but probably nothing else. Or pretty close to nothing else. And it's also because this big blind is going to be a small stack, and what we know about this feed my banker. But something like ace 8 off, I would never ever shove here.
Yeah.
Something like pocket deuces to pocket fives, I think it could be the best line, and it could also, I think it will for sure be profitable, and it might be better to min raise or it might be better to shove, but it's going to be really close with the smallest pocket pairs. Pocket kings. Now it's going to be please don't shove here. Why I have marked this hand? This should be a min raise, right?
Obviously.
Yeah? Okay, our opponent bets for over a pot here. What do we do?
Oh, we just shove.
Why?
Because, well, if we call, we have to shove the turn regardless.
And what bad can come from the turn?
Well, nothing, pretty much. Only aces, nothing else, pretty much.
And even if we are hitting an ace of diamonds, so there are like 3 bad cards on the turn that can come.
But because he's betting over the pot size oversized bet, I could just have him call top pair here.
Because I'm thinking in this situation, when he's overbetting and you are having a position as well, I'm thinking that it's going to be better equity to just call here. I did miss you. What
Huh?
did... I think it's going to be better equity move to call here because he's going to leave himself with just about a pot left on the turn. And there are practically no bad cards that you can hit here.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that it's going to be more likely, especially since you have position. So if he doesn't bet the turn, you can bet the turn yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking calling here will be a lot better. And Marcus White said that if there is a super aggressive 3-better, I think sometimes it could be better to shove the smallest pocket pairs. I'm thinking more that if there is a super aggressive 3-better, okay, but then if there's super aggressive 3-better, then you are also playing like, if there's super aggressive 3-better, then you should be min-raise calling some of those smallest pocket pairs. It would be better then. I think the most horrible part for the small pocket pairs would be if there are a lot of players that are going to flat a lot. So if there is a player that flats a lot and there's a small stack behind him, it makes sense to shove the smallest pocket pairs in that situation.
Well, also this kind of plays now that I look at it with it being a picture here, and I can I have time to think about it. There are players that try to protect their middle pair here, or even their bottom pair, or their draw hands by overbetting and then hoping for a fold or something.
Yeah.
It's an odd line that I have seen in these cheeseburger games.
Yeah, it's going to be... You are going to see weird bets and you are going to see weird overbets. And you did opt for a shove here, and I think it's going to be profitable for sure, but it's going to be better equity to just call, because then our opponent can shove the turn with some weird bluff. And even if he had a flush draw and the flush draw comes through on the turn, you are still probably having a redraw to a better flush. So... Marcus Y. For the king's hand, you don't always have to shoot the cow with a rocket launcher. That's pretty much the point. And we can see in here, our opponent can overbet fold the flop.
Yeah.
And that makes absolutely no sense. Like, our opponent was here with a bluff. Because with those pot odds, 34%, there can't be any draw that our opponent could have that he shouldn't call with.
Yeah.
And he showed like ace-6 suited, so mid-pair. Actually quite good reads on you that some of our opponents are doing that with the bottom pair or mid-pair and overplaying those hands. And that's also one point that we wanna give our opponent space. Like, I should have my theater tools here, and I should have a noose that I could like raise a noose here. So let's just grease the rope and let our opponent hang themselves in these situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our favorite player, Feed My Banker. King 9 off. What do we do here?
With 20 big blinds, we can, well, 17 and a half. We can still min raise here.
It's going to be an easy min raise. Our opponent calls. We are hitting the top pair. Our opponent checks. What do we do?
We see bet.
What's the sizing?
Well, with that kind of a board, we could bet a little bit more than half pot.
I'm thinking about half the pot would be okay in this spot, because I'm thinking that generally opponents are calling calling with higher cards, but in this case that this opponent is calling with such a wide range pre-flop, I'm thinking actually that against the wider range, larger bet sizing is okay. Like about 100 chips would be probably my sizing here. Our opponent just calls. We are hitting another 9. Now you are hearing like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching.
Yeah.
Cash register is clicking along. Our opponent checks again. What do we bet here?
Now we could just put in half pot and shove the river.
Yeah, like 180 to 200 chips. I don't think that you should bet more than that. 200 chips is pretty perfect. Your opponent raises. This should be an easy call. And this is a king on the river. I'm thinking this pot was just about the flop sizing that you did it. You had it pretty big, but I think it actually makes sense.
Yeah, against this opponent who seemed to be doing crazy stuff, I just thought that heads up top pair, then the trips hit on the turn, so just let him pay for his fun.
Yeah.
Because he was obviously going to do it because he was way ahead on the flop already.
Yeah. Let's go back to the king's hand. And there's Callan's question about this. How would you bet, or how would you play this spot with something like 7s to pocket 9s?
Against this oversized raise.
Yep.
Like I said, my reads were middle pair. I don't know. I could have just shove it in here and hope for him having the middle pair or a draw hand.
But I think that's going to be pretty much outside the point here. If we are shoving here, we are going to fold out those mid pairs, or I think we are going to fold out the bottom pairs and mid pairs. There will be some players that make us really happy for continuing with their bottom pairs and medium pairs. But I'm thinking if we are shoving here, we are going to pretty much get our pocket 7s to pocket 9s against hands that are going to be either a flush draw or then they are going to be a 10. And against the 10 we are drawing 2 outs. So I'm thinking actually calling would be better with pocket 7s to pocket 9s. And something like a weak mid pair we should probably fold in this spot. But top pair is going to be something that we are not folding. And I'm thinking that most top pairs would be... Actually, I think that most hands would be... It's really hard to find out the hand here that I would like to shove. Probably flush draws would be the perfect example of a hand that I would like to shove here. Because then we are gaining something for making our opponent fold. Because our opponent would always have equity against us in this situation. But with any made hand, I think that calling is better.
Yeah.
And now there is actually one good question that Julos Pro had earlier on how different do our opponents play if they are playing against button raise or if they are playing against a small blind raise. And let's go to make a new report. We would like to make an all players report, so we want to have all players in the report. And when we are having all players in the report, we can see that there's our nickname at the top, then there are the players that we have played most against, and then we want to filter ourselves out. We don't want our own hands to, because there are like 11,000 hands, and our hands would be 4,600. So we want to filter our own hands away so we don't poison the data with our own tendencies.
Okay.
So we are adding new simple filter, then hand details, and we are adding a player is hero. And now we are clicking not player is hero. So then we are excluding all hero nicknames. And when we are doing the filter here, the filter is applied to the report we created. And it's not showing down there, so you'll need to know that you are having a filter here.
Okay.
And now we can see that we are having 6,500 hands here. And when now we see that we are not having the Goon Rocket hands here anymore. So now we can start to see like how our opponents are playing. So let's add a stat here. And actually folds, I think it's going to be steals, I think. Fold big blind to steal. So we are having a fold big blind to steal here. And then we are having additional filters for the report. That in here we can see that our opponents in general are folding 46% their big blinds to a steal. So let's go to hand details, player position pre-flop, and position of first raiser. And let's put the first raiser to be on the small blind. And when the first raiser is going to be in the small blind, and actually we'll need to do it a bit more. Hand details, number of players dealt into the hand is going to be 3 to 3, so we are having only 3-handed hands. And 3-handed opponent are and then we can easily, when we are having a three-handed game, we can also use the not. So when it's not three-handed, it's going to be heads up. And facing a raise, actually it's from small blind. And two-handed, facing a raise from small blind. And then we are adding the last part. So 3 to 3 and hand details, player position pre-flop. And exactly from the button. No, we did a stupid filter. Player position pre-flop, and it's not active player, but if the first raiser is going to be exactly 0. And we are seeing that our opponent is going to be folding a big blind to a steal for I think the difference is quite minute. But we are having like 1,200 hands, so we are having some variance in these stats. But I'm thinking that these stats are going to be so close together that we shouldn't add a fold big blind to steal in just blind versus blind situations, I think. But this is something that you can do with Poker Tracker 4 pretty easily. That we can look like how often, especially in these games, because in $1 games, actually, I think all the other guys are pretty much going to be they are going to be pretty random, guys.
Yeah.
So we can go for the, like, how often do our opponents steal from button? How often do our opponents in general steal from small blind? So we can use these stats that you have collected, these 6,500 hands, and this is only from 200 tournaments.
Yeah.
So we can use these stats to, like, start to deducing some basic ranges on how often do our opponents fold to a steal, how often do they steal from button, and how often do they steal from small blind, and then improve our own play.
Yeah.
Own play to play pretty well against the general opponents. And we can also have here how many tournaments you have played against.
Yeah.
So tournaments. So we can see, like, you are having one player that you have played 4 tournaments with out of these 200 games.
Yeah.
And if you are opening...
It's most likely that he has been on all of the 4 tables.
Yeah, and so you have, like, opened 4 tables at once, and...
Yeah.
Yeah. And good night to Caleon. Thanks for your comments. So I'm thinking right about now, this was the last thing to talk about and last thing to show.
Yeah.
So...
And that was very good, because now I have a video to look at how to make those filters and do the same thing to all of the games played.
Yeah, so you are having a lot more data then.
Yeah, I have about 1K games now played.
So. Do you have any questions?
Well, not really. This was very informative, and I'm very happy that there was such terrible mistakes I'm doing on these games, and I have to turn down the tables to maybe 2 and see how that improves, because I don't want to miss more hands like that you showed now.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that there was as big mistakes, so it's not micromanaging some bet sizing only or something very small, that there's easy to fix leaks.
Yeah, I think it's going to be... I think for most of the students it's going to be... I think during the first hour there is going to be the biggest leaks, because I usually like to... Like in your case, I like to see a lot of tournaments at once, because then I can do some statistical analysis and look on what I think that the best players in the certain game are doing, and how do you compare to that, and what's going to be the worst part where you are leaking. And if we would have had more time, like right now we are a bit over the time, I think, but if we would have had more time, we would have probably looked some hands through with the Hold'em resources calculator and look with the quick analyze that how many of those hands have you folded, which would have been profitable to shove as well.
Yeah.
Because those are going to be really easy to spot with Hold'em resources, and those are at least going to be hands that you need to play.
And well, I also want to have more data, and then maybe do another coaching again.
It should be interesting, and it should be interesting also to hear from you that how has your chips per game been improving.
Yeah, I sent you my current situation.
Do you want me to show it, or?
Yeah, you can show it. I can post it on my blog and you can comment it or whatever. But yes, you can show it. I don't mind.
Yeah. So this is what we are looking at. So this is like 16,000 hands. So it's about 800 games probably.
Yeah, something like that.
If it's about 800 games and it's about 30 EV chips per game, I'm thinking that you are probably, after rake, you are losing like 1 or 1.5 So there is some improvement that needs to be made with. But I think that you are going to be in a good path forward. There are going to be some spots that, and I think that if from today's session, if you would try to carry on with something like 8 tables, I'm thinking that you would screw up pretty badly, because it's going to be, when you are increasing the amount of hands that you are playing, it's also making you a lot more hurried in the games.
Yeah, and like I said, that 8 tables was like a session or 2, playing like 3 times 8 tables and then quitting because it was obviously too busy. As my old computer is getting laggy and all those fancy graphics of the lottery numbers running and beeping noises and all the fancy guitar string noises are making my computer lag. So I'd rather just play now 2 and then add more when I don't make mistakes like you showed everyone now.
Yeah, and I think that in Spin and Goes, when I have posted about that the games are going to be really awesome if you can post rakeback make 5% or more, because then you are winning even when you are not hitting the highest multipliers.
Yeah.
But those games are going to be really rough for you, and it's going to be really hard to make money in the games if you are having less than the 5% ROI. So what I'm recommending usually is going to be that you need to, or if you want to play those games professionally and not just as a lottery, then, or not professionally, if you want to play those games with a goal, you pretty much want to first, with a small amount of tables, try to improve at the level that you can. You can win at least. And like I think something like 3% ROI, which would be about 55 to 60 chips, it's going to be about the edge that you are not going to require a huge bankroll, because you are getting about 2% of the 2% of the rake that you are paying, you are getting back. So,
and that's why even though it's stupid to play this $1 game because the rake is higher, I just want to fix things up, and then, like I said, I'm rolled for at least $3 games, but I want to fail in the $1 games, and then when that improves to winning stake, and then I can is easier and more comfortable move up.
Yeah,
instead of paying to learn to play these games profitably in the games I'm just about rolled to.
Yeah, I'm thinking that if we are talking about the Spin and Goes, we'll know that the first 2 levels are having the same rake. So if you are not winning like at the $1 games, you are not winning at the $3 games, and you are definitely not winning at the $7 games. So I think it's going to be a really smart idea to first learn at the lowest level. And when I started at first, it was like, I think the $1 and $3 games were having 6% rake, and the $7 and up were having $4 of rake. So I started at the first level that was not raked a lot.
Yeah.
And I played something like 1,000 games and gathered some data and looked on what's going to be the most profitable way on approaching some situations. And there's Deja. Thank you for adding those, that you are getting a public-private coaching with a discounted price. So I think this is going to be one of those coachings that's about cheapest coaching around. And you are also giving something back to the community by choosing the public-private coaching. And thanks for your braveness. That's also what I would say, that it always takes a brave man to get the mistakes out in the wild. So, but I think
it's a good way to show that I play crappy and then suddenly I play well and then start winning.
Yeah, there's always also good that, and I think we discussed during the break that it's nicer to see that there is a lot of improvement to be made that's easy, rather than if we are just discussing about should we bet 40% or 50% post-flop. So I think it's going to be... I think in this situation it's the basis of the games that we have discussed.
Yeah. And I'm happy that even with these mistakes, both the green and the yellow graph in chips are going up, even though they're not going up enough, but they're still going up. So it's not totally disastrous, even with such big leaks. So after I can fix those, I think it turns into a steeper uphill.
Yeah, and I think like if we are looking at the graph, it was something like about 30 or a bit more chips per game.
Yeah.
So even then it's only going to be like about minus 1% ROI. So even when you have played 800 games and when you have played them with minus 1% ROI, so then you would expect to lose like a cent per game. And if you are expecting to lose like a cent per game, you are like expected to lose $8 during the course of 800 games. So that's like the point on why to start up from the $1 games. And if it would be from the 30s, then it would be like $240 that you are expected to lose, and you could lose easily like $3,000. So, and in the $1
$36 downswing with EV doing flat line. So these are fun games to play.
The variance isn't fun. The games are usually fun, but I must agree that the variance isn't that fun. But I think this has been a really good session, and and I'm thinking that we are also having a lot of what we can improve, even for someone that has a background in heads up, sit and goes. So, and that's usually the best way to start with those spin and goes. So, I'm thinking that it's going to be the last moments of our public-private coaching. Would you have something to say for the community?
Yeah, well, thanks for everyone who participated on the chat, and like I said, I'm most likely going to have another one of these when I get more data after this coaching and get more games in and see how we improve.
That's going to be probably interesting to see, and you are one of the most active bloggers, or the most active blogger on Poker-Imania, so we should see a lot of your actions in the future, and you have probably played about every single format of poker made available. So,
and I'm very happy that I'm back to the SNGs after my real life situation turned into a better, and I can play at nights at least these games.
Yeah, so that's also good to hear that the real life situation is better, and you are not required to do...
wake up all night anymore, it's just dad now.
Yeah, but then it's also, from my part, thanks everybody who participated in chat. It's great to have you here, and it also gives some extra value for the guy that's being public-private coach, as when there are 20 eyes looking at the game, it's going to be... we are going to see more mistakes than if it's only for me. And also, I'm sometimes wrong and the chat is right, so that's also another point. And it's always easier to have a good session when chat is active. And we are going to have a session on Sunday. I don't know what's going to be there on Sunday, but I hope that we are having a nice tournament night. Next Tuesday there is going to be a cash game night by You Lost Bro. So we are seeing some English cash game strategy that we have been lacking. I hope I see as many of you on Tuesday as possible. And on next Wednesday we are also having another pot limit Omaha night. So there's a lot of English poker content on our site during these 2 weeks. And now it's time to end, so if you are going to sleep, have a good night. If you are playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!
Bye!